You know that feeling when you get back after being away, maybe just for a bit, and things are, well, not quite how you left them.
Standard slip, things get rearranged.
Yeah, exactly. Now imagine being gone for years, serving a king, and you return to find the core principles you established just completely unraveling.
Yeah, that's pretty much the situation we're jumping into today in Nehemiah chapter 13.
Right, he comes back from serving King Artaxerxes in Persia, gets permission to return to Jerusalem, and finds things have seriously drifted.
Seriously drifted is putting it mildly in some cases. The laws, the reforms they'd all agreed to, ignored.
So our mission here is to unpack exactly what problems Nehemiah found, what the text tells us about them, and his pretty forceful reactions.
Forceful is definitely the word. He doesn't exactly mince words or actions based on the rule book he's using, which is the Law of Moses.
Let's dive in. So one of the first things mentioned seems to happen when the community itself re-engages with the text.
It does. The account says, on that day, the book of Moses was read aloud in the hearing of the people, a public reading.
And this reading has an immediate impact.
A huge one, because, while they're reading, it was found written that no Ammonite or Moabite should ever be admitted into the assembly of God.
Specific exclusion based on the text itself. Does it say why?
It does. It references their history, because they had not met the Israelites with food and water, but had hired Balaam to call a curse down on them. And it adds that little parenthetical reminder, our God, however, turned the curse into a blessing.
Okay, so they hear this specific law read out, understand the reason given in the text. What happens next? Do they debate it?
No debate mentioned. The text describes a really swift, decisive reaction. When the people heard this law, they excluded from Israel all who were of foreign descent.
Wow, just like that. They hear it, they do it.
Exactly. It shows how much authority that written word held for them, especially when it was brought back into focus like this. They heard it, they acted, no committee needed.
That swiftness is striking. A reminder of a core principle found in their foundational text, leading to immediate, pretty drastic social change.
It definitely set a tone, aligning with the rediscovered law instantly.
Okay, so that's one issue addressed through reading the law. But Nehemiah himself, on his return, he starts noticing other things that went wrong while he was away.
Yes, and one of the big ones is right in the temple complex itself, a real violation of sacred space.
Tell us about that.
Well, the text says that before Nehemiah got back, Eliashib the priest, who was overseeing the temple storerooms and apparently closely associated with Tobiah.
Tobiah, wait, wasn't he one of the guys who actively opposed Nehemiah building the wall? An outsider, an adversary.
The very same. And this priest, Eliashib, had provided him, Tobiah, with a large room right there in the courts of the house of God.
A room in the temple courts.
Like,
Marked Tobiah.
Yep. And not just any spare room. This was a space formerly used to store the grain offerings and incense and temple articles, and also the tithes, prescribed for the Levites, singers, and gatekeepers, as well as the contributions for the priests.
Hold on. So, the storeroom for the essential worship items and the support system for the temple staff was cleared out and given to this known opponent.
Precisely, facilitated by the priest in charge. And the text is careful to point out Nehemiah wasn't there.
Okay, so it specifies his absence.
It does. But while all this was going on, I was not in Jerusalem. Sometime later, I asked his permission and came back to Jerusalem. It's only after his return that he finds out about the evil thing Eliashib had done.
Evil thing. The text doesn't pull punches there. This is way beyond just bad administration. It's a desecration, isn't it? Giving sacred space to an enemy.
Absolutely. It undermined the whole purpose of the temple area.
Yeah.
And Nehemiah's reaction when he finds out, it's explosive.
What does he do? Confront Eliashib? Call a meeting?
Nope. The text says he was greatly displeased, and his first action, he personally threw all Tobiah's household goods out of the room.
Wait, he did it himself. He physically tossed the guy's belongings out.
That's what it says. It's such a visceral reaction, isn't it? It shows the depth of his outrage. This wasn't just mismanagement, it was defilement.
So it's a personal, symbolic act of cleansing the space.
Exactly. He's rejecting Tobiah's presence totally. And then he orders the rooms to be purified, likely ritually cleansed, and puts everything back, the equipment of the house of God with the grain offerings and the incense, restoring it.
That's incredibly direct. And that issue, the misuse of the storeroom, connects directly to another problem he finds, right? About those very supplies.
It does, because Nehemiah then learns that the portions assigned to the Levites had not been given to them. The whole system of tithing, meant to support the temple workers, had just stopped.
The Levites, the singers, The gatekeepers, they weren't getting their share.
Nope. The support system failed, and the consequence was immediate and devastating for temple service.
What happened?
The text says all the Levites and singers responsible for the service had gone back to their own fields. They couldn't survive in Jerusalem without support, so they had to leave their posts and go back to farming.
So the neglect of the financial support system literally shut down the temple operations because the staff had to leave.
That's the ripple effect. The house of God was neglected because the people dedicated to it weren't being sustained.
How does Nehemiah handle this one? More throwing things.
Not this time. His first step here is accountability. He rebuked the officials. He confronts the leadership directly, asking them, why is the house of God neglected? He holds them responsible for the system's breakdown.
Okay, so he confronts the officials. Then what?
Then he fixes it. He calls the Levites and singers back, gets them stationed at their posts again, and crucially, he gets the resources flowing. The text says, all Judah brought the tithes of grain, new wine, and oil into the storerooms. The community responds.
But just restarting the flow might not be enough if the management failed before. Does he address that?
He does. He learned his lesson, it seems. He appoints specific, trustworthy people to manage the storerooms and distribution. He names them: Shelemiah the priest, Zadok the scribe, and Pedaiah, plus an assistant, Hanan.
And the key criteria.
The text explicitly states, because these men were considered trustworthy, he put reliable administrators in place to ensure it wouldn't happen again.
Right, a practical solution. Restore the people, restore the funding, install reliable oversight. Makes sense.
And right after this, we get another one of those personal notes from Nehemiah, a kind of prayer.
What does it say?
Remember me for this, O my God, and do not blot out what I have so faithfully done for the house of my God and its services. He sees this administrative fix as faithful service to God.
It really underscores how personally invested he was.
Oh.
Okay, moving on. Another big area where things had slipped was the Sabbath.
Oh yeah, fundamental practice. And it was being violated left, right, and center, according to the text.
What kinds of things were happening?
Nehemiah personally saw people in Judah treading wine presses on the Sabbath, which is work, and bringing in grain and loading it on donkeys, transporting goods. Wine, grapes, figs, all other kinds of loads were being brought into Jerusalem on the Sabbath.
So basic agricultural work and commerce, treating like any other day.
Exactly. And it wasn't just locals. Men from Tyre who lived in Jerusalem were bringing in fish and all kinds of merchandise and selling them in Jerusalem on the Sabbath to the people of Judah. A regular market day, basically.
How does Nehemiah react to this, especially towards the leadership?
He's furious. He rebuked the nobles of Judah, called it a wicked thing, and desecrating the Sabbath day.
Strong words.
And he immediately connects it to their past troubles. He asks them, didn't your forefathers do the same things so that our God brought all this calamity upon us and upon this city?
He's reminding them of the consequences of past disobedience.
Yes, he warns them flat out, you are stirring up more wrath against Israel by desecrating the Sabbath. He sees a direct link between breaking this law and inviting disaster. It's serious business.
So, strong words, historical warnings. What actions does he take? How does he stop it?
He takes direct control of the city's access points. When evening shadows fell on the gates of Jerusalem before the Sabbath, I ordered the doors to be shut and not opened until the Sabbath was over. Lock down the city.
And he enforced it.
Oh, yes. I stationed some of my own men at the gates so that no load could be brought in on the Sabbath day. He used his personal guards.
Did the merchants just give up?
Not immediately. The text says, once or twice the merchants and sellers of all kinds of goods spent the night outside Jerusalem. Trying to wait it out, maybe?
Huh. So what did Nehemiah do then?
He confronted them directly. He warned them, why do you spend the night by the wall? If you do this again, I will lay hands on you.
He threatened them with physical force.
Seems like it, a direct threat. I will lay hands on you. And apparently it worked. From that time on, they no longer came on the Sabbath.
Wow, that's direct enforcement. Did he involve anyone else?
Yes, he also involved the religious personnel. Then I commanded the Levites to purify themselves and go and guard the gates in order to keep the Sabbath day holy, making its observance a sacred duty for them too.
So rebuke, warning, history lesson, physical gate closure, personal guards, direct threats, and involving the Levites. A multi-pronged approach.
Absolutely, covering all the bases. And again, after describing all this, another personal prayer.
What's this one?
Remember me for this also, O my God, and show mercy to me according to your great love. again, seeking God's acknowledgement and mercy for his actions.
Okay, one last major issue tackled in this chapter, and it's a really sensitive one touching on identity.
Intermarriage,
Yeah.
yes. This was clearly a huge concern for Nehemiah. He saw men of Judah who had married women from Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab.
And the concern wasn't just theoretical, was it? The text points to a very real, tangible consequence.
Right. It wasn't just about religious boundaries in the abstract. He observed that half of their children spoke the language of Ashdod, or the language of one of the other peoples, and did not know how to speak the language of Judah.
The children were losing the language, the language of their culture, their law.
Exactly. A direct threat to cultural and covenant continuity. If they can't speak the language, how do they maintain their identity, understand the scriptures? It's a fundamental erosion.
And Nehemiah's reaction to this discovery, it's maybe the most extreme in the chapter.
It's definitely the most physically violent described. The text is stark. I rebuked them and called curses down on them. I beat some of the men and pulled out their hair.
He beat them and pulled their hair out. That's shocking.
It is. It shows an incredible level of distress and anger. He clearly saw this as an existential threat, an act of profound unfaithfulness. The physical violence is extreme, reflecting how severely he viewed the offense.
What else did he do besides the violence and curses?
He made them take a solemn oath in God's name, promising to stop the practice. You are not to give your daughters in marriage to their sons, nor are you to take their daughters in marriage for your sons or for yourselves.
And he brings up a historical example here too, doesn't he? A surprising one.
Yes, King Solomon, the wisest king loved by God. Nehemiah asks, was it not because of marriages like these that Solomon, king of Israel, sinned? Even he was led into sin by foreign women.
The argument being, if even Solomon fell because of this, how can you think you're immune?
Precisely. He challenges them directly. Must we hear now that you two are doing all this terrible wickedness and are being unfaithful to our God by marrying foreign women? He frames it squarely as religious infidelity.
And this problem wasn't just among the general population, right? It reached high levels.
Right to the very top. The text highlights a specific case involving the high priest's family. One of the sons of Joiada, son of Eliashib the high priest, was son-in-law to Sanballat the Horonite.
Sanballat, another one of Nehemiah's chief opponents. So the high priest's grandson married into the enemy's family.
That's the situation, a major breach within the priestly lineage itself.
And Nehemiah's response to that individual.
No ambiguity there. And I drove him away from me. Expulsion. Ejection from his presence, possibly from the community. A clear message that this kind of alliance, especially within the priesthood, was unacceptable.
So the problem had really infiltrated the religious leadership.
Which explains his next step. He focused on cleansing the leadership itself. So I purified the priests and the Levites of everything foreign, and assigned them duties, each to his own task. A targeted purification of the clergy.
The chapter then seems to conclude by noting other restorations.
Just briefly, yes. Mentioning he made sure provisions were made for the contributions of wood at designated times, and for the first fruits, other necessary temple supplies. And then one final set of prayers.
What are those?
He asks God to remember those priests who defiled the priesthood and the covenant, essentially calling for judgment on them, and then concludes with that recurring personal plea. Remember me with favor, oh my God.
So let's recap this deep dive into Nehemiah 13. Nehemiah returns, finds major drift, problems ranging from applying an old law about exclusion
To an enemy leader being given space in the temple, displacing sacred items.
to the temple staff being neglected and leaving their posts.
To the Sabbath being treated like any other workday, with commerce and labor.
And finally, intermarriage that threatened linguistic and cultural identity, even reaching the high priest's family.
And Nehemiah's response, as we've seen in the text, is consistently forceful. He references the law, takes direct physical action, throwing things, confronting, even beating people, institutes administrative fixes with trustworthy people, issues sharp rebukes, uses historical warnings, enforces oaths, and purifies the priesthood.
It's a really detailed picture, straight from the source text, of a leader confronting widespread complacency and taking, shall we say, decisive steps based on his understanding of the law to restore order and distinctiveness.
It definitely shows the challenges of maintaining standards and identity, especially after vigilance slips, and the sometimes shocking measures a leader might feel are necessary to bring a community back to its core principles.
Which really leaves us, and you, with something to think about. What does this chapter with Nehemiah finding this drift and reacting so strongly based on the written law suggest about how communities today maintain their own core principles or identity? especially when things get comfortable or after attention has wandered? How do groups rediscover what's essential, and what methods, perhaps less dramatic than Nehemiah's, are involved in reaffirming those standards when they've been neglected?